On our latest stop in the Christian calendar, we stop at Easter. Easter is by far the biggest celebration in Christianity. In fact, without Easter, there is no Christianity. There's no Christian calendar. Without Jesus and his resurrection from the dead, none of this happens. And of course, Abby Olcese, she's going to join us one more time as we stop and we connect film and the Christian calendar. And today's film is going to be The Iron Giant. What Jesus did on the cross and in his resurrection, where he gave us life, victory over death, and forgiveness of sins, it changed everything. And so we're going to celebrate that today. We're going to celebrate Jesus' resurrection and what that means for us and what that means for all followers of Jesus of all time. All right, everybody, sit down and enjoy this Easter episode of the Live Faith First podcast. Darkness on Friday has given light to Jesus' resurrection on Sunday. Where there was doubt, anger, frustration, fear, questions, there were answers that would change the world. A ripple was set in motion on Friday that would resonate around the globe for all of human history and into eternity. Jesus' crucifixion was a result of the fear of the Roman government and religious leaders that didn't like what Jesus said and that he was building a group of followers. But Easter isn't about fear. It's about love. It's about banishing fear to the furthest reaches of the universe. It's about love winning, love giving life. Once again, we have Abby Olcese joining us for this Easter episode of the Live Faith First podcast. So Abby, thank you for joining us once again here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This has been a fun little go through Lent. And again, your book goes to a lot more detail on Lent. So if, again, this is something where you kind of want to journey additionally, grab Abby's book. It's super fun. And the chapter, one of the things that I love when I get books that aren't super long, it's great. So Abby's chapters are like 8 to 10 pages and you get like a whole holiday and a movie review all in one. So I don't know. What's your longest chapter, you think? Maybe 10, 12 pages, something like that?
Oh, gosh. Yeah. I think the longest one is probably in Lent. I think it's Last Temptation of Christ. It's, yeah, because that one requires a little bit of extra context to kind of get folks on board. But yes, yes, I think that's as long as it gets.
So a great seasonal read. It's a book you can read all year long and kind of pull it out as the Christian calendar moves along. So anyway, all right, we're at Easter. Okay, So we're going to talk about the Iron Giant today, which I'm curious why you chose. I mean, I know why you chose a movie, but there's a lot of movies with kind of resurrection themes and those in it. So I'm interested to hear that. But before we get there, what is Easter? And let's do this in two phases because there's kind of the historical reality and then there's a spiritual reality of it. So let's start with historical. Historically, what is Easter?
So historically, Easter, like in the church, historically, it's when we celebrate the resurrection of Christ. It also, in popular culture, kind of just gets conflated with the beginning of spring. And so there's new life kind of coming in a variety of different ways. I think historically it might have been the placement of it in the year itself. I think is kind of tied to the pagan celebration of spring. But and I mean that's also kind of true for Christmas, is that it lands where it does in the year because early Christians were trying to make it applicable to people who were not super on board with it, and so making it kind of adjacent to something they already celebrated made it easier. So that's one part. That's one way of looking at it. We have the Easter Bunny, we have Easter egg hunts. All of that kind of comes from a different thing historically, and ties into different kind of cultural traditions.
Yeah. So if you've never been to a church, you don't know Jesus, Easter for you, and it's always interesting to me. I live in California, and Easter is celebrated here, and I say that because there's I don't know, depends on who's counting, 3 to 10% Christians in my community. And yet there's Easter bunnies and there's Easter baskets and Easter egg hunts and all that fun stuff, which I kind of love. It's great.
Yeah.
And there's not a complaint. I just always find it interesting when you live in a region that doesn't lean Christian, maybe leans the opposite, that still Easter is one of those like, yeah, let's at least have an Easter egg hunt or let's do something fun. So that's kind of the historical around it.
Yeah, it's for the kids,
Right, exactly. All right. Now let's talk about the spiritual realities, because there was something amazing that happened that signifies and gives freedom to people who follow Jesus, and really for anybody who would choose him. But talk a little bit about spiritually, what is Easter?
Yeah. So Easter is we talked about Good Friday earlier, and so Good Friday is kind of when we observe the crucifixion and death of Christ. Easter is when we celebrate his resurrection, coming back from the dead, like 3 or so days later. I know you mentioned that historically that might be a little squidgy, but he comes back after time away, and reappears to first to the women in his follower group, Mary Magdalene and other women close to him, and then they go and tell the disciples that he has risen from the dead, and they initially they don't believe him until they see him themselves. There's the disciple Thomas, who refuses to believe until he has put his finger in the side of Christ and can recognize his wounds. And symbolically, it is a like it's kind of the final. Well, maybe not the final, because the final is Ascension Day, but it's basically the biggest sign that Jesus is the Son of God, that Jesus is the true Messiah, that all of the doubt that we saw the disciples experience on Maundy Thursday and Good Friday, that it's okay, that we've come to the other side, hope has returned, and that everything is going to be made right.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, again, you've already heard about a little love for Easter baskets and bunny rabbits, but Easter baskets and bunny rabbits are not in the Bible. I'm not actually even sure where they came from as part of our traditions, but it is the day that for Christians it signifies really the death and resurrection, or what signify our ability to have a relationship with God that's unencumbered. Right. Mm-hmm. It's that victory over death. It's grace coming down on us. The things that were taken from us or given to us, maybe I should say, with Adam and Eve, that story all the way back at the beginning of the Bible, where shame entered in, that was taken away by Jesus, and death entered in, and that was also taken away by Jesus. So the two things that really signify what evil and sin do in us. And now I know that shame comes out in a lot of other ways in our lives, but those are the two big chunky pieces, shame and death. And in Jesus's death and resurrection, those are the things that are overcome for us. And so that is why Christians celebrate Easter the way we do. Now you might think, oh, they celebrate Christmas more. There's more gifts, there's more money, there's more time leading up to it, and some of those types of things spent. But from a which Christian holiday is the one, and maybe, and I'll push back to you on this one, because in my tradition, Easter has been, you wrote a whole book on the Christian calendar. Would you agree with that? Like, and kind of as you've gone through this, is this the one?
I think they're the kind of the two big tent poles are Christmas at one end and Easter at the other. And everything that kind of falls between are either directly related to those holidays, or they're kind of the ones that fall through the cracks. So we get between circling back around between Easter and Advent. There are a lot of holidays that we tend not to think of as much. Christmas, the birth of Christ, and the virgin birth are kind of the big miracles there, the announcement that things are about to change, and with Easter, the arrival of that change, of our fundamentally altered relationship with God. The kind of mending of what was broken are kind of the two big tent poles that make Christianity what it is.
Yeah, absolutely right. All right, you titled this chapter of your book "Fear Kills, Love Resurrects." Do you want to dig into that a little bit? Why did you choose that? Was that connected to your movie? Was that connected to resurrection or crucifixion, resurrection? Tell me a little bit about that.
The answer is yes to all of the above, I think. It's the Iron Giant is a movie about a misunderstood alien middleman who falls to Earth from space during the Cold War. importantly. And so a lot of the fear that the giant encounters at the hands of mankind is due to the fact that they are afraid that he is a Russian weapon and could trigger a nuclear apocalypse, basically. Um, that's why he is treated the way that he is, in addition to the fact that he's, huge. Um, and so there is that. But it's also kind of similar to the way that Jesus is treated by the Pharisees, in that he represents something very different, something that kind of upends their social and cultural accepted norms. And the fear of what that change represents is ultimately what leads to the crucifixion. Is fear of what that change could bring about in terms of established political power, but also just uncertainty of what the future could bring if it is allowed to kind of proliferate. And I think I think the bridge between those two things is very interesting. It's what one of the reasons that the Iron Giant makes I think a pretty interesting analog for Easter. But also those themes are really very deeply prevalent in the world that we live in. And so I think it was an interesting opportunity for me to kind of look at the movie and the this particular period of the church year, and also how those themes exist just in the world outside of both of them.
Yeah. 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 That's really good. And just listening to you and just thinking through, how that would apply into just our world outside of Jesus' crucifixion, resurrection, and this movie and that's so true. The way, whether it's the words we use when we other people, right? That idea, if you're on the other side, that somehow you're evil, and there's fear of the other side. And then our responses to that tend to be, whether it's character killing or fighting or actual killing, like those things take place. And where love is there, yeah, I don't think that can exist. I don't
Right.
think
Yeah.
love
I
and
think,
fear can coexist.
yeah. There's a difference, I think, when you disagree in love with somebody and when you disagree in fear with somebody. And often when the fear comes out, hate follows pretty closely, and emotional and physical and psychological violence follow that pretty closely too, at least in my own limited experience. And I think we see that reflected both in the movie and also in the crucifixion narrative.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. All right. Give us a little more about Iron Giant. We got that it's set in Cold War, and it did come from space, right? This was with space. This is an alien, but it looks very much like, 50s, 60s, like robot. Like what we
He's a
would have.
giant metal man. He's a giant robot.
Giant metal man,
Yeah.
who's he's kind of likable though,
Yeah, he's very sweet.
He's a very sweet giant, but he
Yeah,
does eat a lot of metal. So
he does.
so all right, so kind of take us to the movie. Who are the characters? And walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, so the giant ends up falling from space and landing off the coast of Maine in the 1950s, and he is like he devours metal. That's what he lives off of. That's his food. And so he is found when he gets kind of tangled up in a power station and creates like this massive amount of unintentional destruction by a little boy named Hogarth, who is he's very curious, and he loves to, like, we see him adopting like a pet squirrel early on. He has a real heart for lost things, basically. And he falls in love with the giant immediately because he's a little boy who loves comic books, and like, who wouldn't want their very own giant 50-foot robot who is also their best friend? And so Hogarth and the giant befriend this artist who has a metal scrapyard named Dean, who between Hogarth and Dean, they kind of help the giant understand what life is like on Earth, and understand basically how to be a good citizen of the Earth. At the same time, the U.S. government has noticed kind of the disruption that this mysterious, they don't know that the giant is the giant yet. They just know that something is eating up all the metal in the surrounding area, and it may or may not be a frightening Soviet weapon. And so they send an agent named Kent Mansley out to Maine to kind of check out the situation and see what's going on. And he is a deeply paranoid person who is all in on kind of American exceptionalism and the need to stop communism in its tracks, which were very prevalent ideas at the time. And you see references to like actual Cold War stuff throughout the movie. There's a educational video that Hogarth and his classmates watch at one point called Duck and Cover that's based on an actual short from the time, which is kind of insane if you think about it because it's really dark. It's basically just like what to do in the event of a nuclear attack. And they're telling the kids to like get under their desks and take cover, which would ultimately not really do very much. But anyway, that's beside the point. I think the fact that that Brad Bird, who directed it and co-wrote the film, that he is kind of a child of that era is really important. He's thinking a lot about the stuff that existed when he was growing up. So that's important to note. But ultimately, the government discovers the giant. They react in fear. The giant reacts in a way that kind of betrays his original programming that he's been able to overcome and didn't realize was there. It turns out that he's just basically been built to be a giant gun, which he no longer wants to be. And so he there's this big fight between the giant and the government that's all based on gross misunderstanding, and it leads to a nuclear bomb being fired, a missile being fired, and the giant decides to save his friends and to intercept the missile, which does blow him up. And we end the movie thinking that he has been destroyed completely. But it turns out that he has not. The last shot of the film is of Hogarth has this bolt that was sent to him by the government that was the last thing that they were able to find of the giant. And the last scene of the film, the bolt basically comes to life on its own and leaves, and we see it going up toward, I think, Antarctica with a bunch of other pieces of the giant and reassembling. And so the giant, in a sense, resurrects. And so it kind of becomes its own like animated resurrection story.
Yes. And just so we're clear, this movie came out in late 90s. So though it's set there. And does Harry Connick Jr. have not the most, like, I caught his voice immediately.
Oh, immediately.
Like,
Yeah.
Harry Connick Jr. I don't know what it is about that voice, but there's a few of them out there like, dude, all right, I guess Harry. And Jennifer Aniston, I didn't hear, like, I looked it up. She's the mom. And I didn't hear the voice. And even though I watched a lot of Friends in the 90s for whatever reason, but anyway, I digress. Let's talk about Jesus and film here. So, so it is this kind of really cool story, though, of self-sacrifice.
Yeah.
What I also find interesting is that the Iron Giant he's definitely a Christ figure in that he's larger than life. He saves, he protects, he self-sacrifices. But unlike Christ, he also had this struggle of like being violent when he didn't want to be violent, and then kind of getting coerced into it and in order to protect. And so just that he became very relatable as you watch this kind of child kind of, I'm going to say, grow up and then decide that in the end he learned from Hogarth, who was saying, like, guns, guns, we don't need those. Like, you don't need to kill people. Yeah. So,
that it's bad to kill, but it's not bad to die, basically, which is, I think, what allows him to realize what it is he's able to do to help other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Just an amazing line. I think I'm still working through that one. That's a crazy line. Tell me some of the other connections you're drawing between the Iron Giant and Jesus' death and resurrection. Kind of are there any other ones that you're out there that we want to talk about today, or are those the big ones already?
Yeah. So, I mean, we've talked about a lot of the big ones. One other big one is that kind of like a little bit like Jesus, the giant exists in a place that really does not want him there, that he's given way more reasons to fear humanity and to, just allow for its demise than he is to save it, to sacrifice himself to save it. I mean, Jesus obviously is the Son of God and has the purpose of, coming to save the earth. But part of what makes the gospel such an interesting and powerful story is that he does all that in spite of the fact that he is surrounded by people who just do not get him, and some people who actively work against his ministry. And I think in our own kind of limited human capacity, it would be very easy to just kind of write people off and forsake them and say, well, forget you guys, I'm going to go do my own thing. And if you're not on board, then I guess too bad for you. That's not what Jesus did. It's also
Yeah.
not what the giant does. The giant saves everybody because he wants to, as he says, he's given the choice to become either Superman or Automo the Metal Menace, and he decides that he wants to be Superman. The last thing that he says before he hits the bomb and explodes, he says Superman. That is what he identifies himself as. You could also argue that Superman is a Christ figure, but that's another discussion for another day. That's, I think, another thing that really struck me is that there's a message in there about doing what is right and sacrificing yourself for the good of other people, even when those other people are probably not going to be that grateful that you did it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, it does. And especially in light of Jesus doing things for people who weren't born, weren't around. Like, I mean, here we are thousands of years later, and the work that Jesus did on the cross is still impacting us.
Yep. And we're still messing up, and we still need grace, and we still get it.
Yes.
Amazingly,
exactly.
We still receive it.
we are. Yeah, amazingly, we haven't figured it out yet after all these years. Like, my goodness, you would think that somebody along the way would have figured this all out. But the other theme, and I don't remember if you brought this up in this book or if this kind of has come in somewhere else, but just that the idea of othering.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see this agent, and he was unwilling and unable to see the Iron Giant for who he truly was. He just chose from the outset that he was bad, he was evil from the other side, he was Russian, he was Soviet, he was, whatever it was, right? That he decided that no matter what, the Iron Giant had to go. And to the point where he's disobeying orders from military, he's making calls that in the end would have created his own demise. I mean, that's kind of interesting too, but the Iron Giant changed him. And when we go to Jesus, a lot of the reason Jesus was being crucified was because of the work he was doing, uplifting the poor, uplifting the foreigner, that he had traitors in his midst that he still chose to love. We have Judas, we have Peter, who denied him, his best friend, and he's denying that he even knew who Jesus was. And so I kind of look at that othering concept. And the other thing about Jesus' inclusivity is that on the cross, and this is from your book, on the cross, the names that were written on the sign, King of the Jews, was written in 3 different languages.
Yeah.
Which, again, this is, I don't know about mind-blowing, but it was like, oh, dude, that is a thought. That idea of Jesus' inclusivity, right? Like, it's like, whether or not, the Romans meant, whatever the Romans meant, they meant mockery, but Jesus crosses divides. He's not afraid of the other. There is no other for Jesus. It is only belonging with Jesus. And I can't help but also see that theme kind of connect with who Jesus is in the othering, but also just in this movie, right? Where you have some just Iron Giant is othered, and 50 feet metal giants, I guess, might, at least.
And he also, he encounters even sin that is, sin or tragedy that's not even directed at him. There's that really touching scene where he and Hogarth are in the woods together, and they see a deer, and then the deer is shot and killed by a hunter, by somebody who they don't even see. And the giant is really sad about the death of the deer, and Hogarth tells him that it's okay to, it's bad to kill, but it's okay to die. Which is just that one of these things is just an inevitability, but one of these things is preventable. And I think that's something that really sticks with him. That's a lesson that kind of sits really, really deep, so that when he is given the choice between something that is inevitable and something that is preventable, he chooses to prevent, even though it means his own inevitable demise, because that is okay. The killing is not okay, but the dying is okay. And I think that's also, that's a thing that I think, when I was little and was learning about Jesus's death and resurrection, that was something that I had to learn, and it was very hard. It's just like this big hard wall that you run up against, and you don't understand. At least I didn't understand at that point in my life how people could be so mean and so cruel and not understand who Jesus was. Like you spend all this time learning exactly who Jesus is, and then you get to like the biggest point in the story, and the people who he's there to save totally don't see it, and you don't understand how that could be. And I think it's the giant has sort of a similar experience. Like, I don't understand how this could be. And I think uses what he learns from that to save everybody, which I think is really cool. It's, I think, to kind of even carry it forward, I think it empowers the rest of us to see what is inevitable, what is preventable, and what we can do to kind of keep both in their place, basically.
Yeah. No, that's so good. And even as you're talking here, I think just right before Jesus went to the cross, not right before, but in the weeks leading up to it, when his friend Lazarus died. And, it's that shortest verse in the Bible, which as a kid made me so happy because there was a 2-word verse, right? Jesus wept. And again, as a child, why would there be a 2-word verse? Like, why would they make a verse 2 words? That doesn't seem right, other than to make it easy to memorize.
Right.
But the older you get, the more you realize the reason it's 2 words is because Jesus had a significant emotional response to death.
Yeah.
He knew it wasn't right. He knew that people shouldn't die young. That was not the way he made it. That's not the way he created it when he was in heaven creating the earth. And that's that same pain that Jesus felt. He felt pain about death, things that weren't right in this world. He deeply felt that. I'm not sure I should fully take that over to the Iron Giant, but the Iron Giant expressed the same thing, right? Where like,
no, I think you're right. Yeah,
there is that it should bring a response. There should be a response to death. Of sadness, of mourning, of all of those things. And so anyway, but we're here to talk about resurrections today. So, so I'm going to ask you kind of a personal question.
Sure.
Like, we love Christmas, but Easter is a highlight. We've already talked about this, a highlight of the Christian calendar. If you're comfortable, what has that love of Jesus meant to you? Like, when you kind of look at your own life and your own spiritual journey, what is that? How has Jesus' love impacted you? What difference has that made in your life?
Oh man. I think it's one of those things that, like, when you have it your whole life, you kind of don't recognize, like, it takes you a minute to recognize its absence in other places. It's, for me, I think it's reflected in the love and giving that I see in other people. In, at least in a Christian context, I don't think that exists unless you have a story in which everything is given away and reward comes as a result. But it's like an intangible spiritual reward. I think there's that humility and grace that I think a large part of it. I mean, I think in broader secular culture, we're told that we should be humble just because it's a good thing to be. But I think in spiritual culture, you have to be humble, because you have to recognize that Jesus died for your sins, which means that you have to recognize that you sin, that you mess it up regularly. Right. And you have the ability to go on this journey every week with people who, there are some churches that do communion every week, and when you go up to receive communion, you are recognizing that we are all trying to figure this out together, that we have this community that allows us to figure it out together. And in the death and resurrection of Christ, we have the ability, we have the freedom to get it wrong and then to fix it and get it right, and to know that it's okay when we do that it's okay to make mistakes and to admit them and to move on. For me, at least, all of those things have been really foundational to the way that I live my life. Like, I have parents who worked in international education their entire careers. My dad does work with refugees and immigrants in Lawrence, our hometown, and I think the work of that also is very Christ-like to me. Not necessarily that it requires a lot of sacrifice. I mean, it does, of time necessarily, but just the love that I see from that, and the hope that I see in that, I think only exists if we have this understanding that that there is light in the darkness, and that that the darkness does not overcome it, to take it all the way back to Advent. But that the story keeps going on, that even in our lowest moments, we can always look for what's coming next, for things to be made right. And the idea that things will be made right. I think all of that for me exists because we have the resurrection.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's so good. And I think landing where you did on one day this will all be made right. And I think that's the really challenging thing, because I think the longer, I mean, in our own lifetime, we see so many things going evil, bad, wrong, sinful. And yet, and then this has been happening for, how many thousands of years now. Forever. So this is not we're getting this finite, 80, 70, 60, whatever number of years we're blessed with time on this earth. Right. Mm-hmm. And that there is a place, and there's actually some verses in Revelation where it's a scene in the throne room. And this is the one I go to when I don't have a great answer, or the answer, or I have no answer.
Yeah.
Like, why does that happen? I don't know. But there's this picture, there's this scene, John writes, it's throne room, and there's creatures singing and flying, and then there's Jesus, and there's God the Father, and he makes all of these judgments. He judges the world. And all of humanity is in front of him. All of humanity is out there. And their response to God's judgments, to the Father's judgment, is all of your judgments are right and true. All of your judgments are accurate. And the reason I take hope in that verse is because the only people that can truly judge if God's judgments are just are the ones who experience the evil here on this earth, which is us. Mm-hmm. We're the only ones who can judge that. Because we experienced it. We're the only ones who've seen it. We're the only ones who've been in it. And we turn to God and say, every single judgment, every single decision you made was the right one. And it wasn't like we were coerced into saying it. We weren't like, oh, if I don't say it, God's not going to be happy with me.
Right.
It was, no, you got it all right. You got 100 on that exam. And those are the moments for me where I go, I don't know the answer to that. And I'll tell you what I would like the answer to be. And I'll tell you what I think the answer is going to be. But I know no matter what I think, because it really don't matter what I think, at the end of the day, God's going to get it all right. And we're all going to stand before him and say, oh man, I didn't know how that was going to go. And you just pulled it off. Like, that was amazing. And so that's the thing that gives me hope. And that's what love and resurrection does for us. Yeah.
I think about, like, you mentioned that we only see, like, a little bit of what God sees in our time on earth. And I think about, the words of Dr. King, where he said that, he's been to the mountaintop, and I may not get there with you, but I've seen what can happen. I've seen what can be. And I think, like, the best prophetic voices, I think, that we have in our history are people who have done just that, who have seen kind of where they stand in the greater scope of things, and know that they are not the end all and be all. And I think in a sense, I think the crucifixion is that too. I mean, it is in a meaningful sense, it is all. But in a historical sense, I think Jesus dies for the sins of the world, knowing that this is not the end of sin. Like, it's going to keep happening. It's going to get worse. It's going to be really, really horrible for a lot of people. And yet that grace persists. So I think there's, again, we're kind of looking not just long-term, but like universally long-term, which I think is what makes that so powerful. There's a lot of freedom for exploration, and a lot of invitation to grace with yourself, grace with other people, and just kindness and patience, I think, that exists because of that.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I think that's absolutely right. And I think that's one of the most interesting things about understanding the grace we received, is that it's something that we need to be given away. And it's not meant for us to just have, just to kind of receive the grace, but we're a conduit, right? Like, how do we now turn this around and give that grace away to others? Something happened in our house about a month and a half ago, and it was kind of, it was weird because the level of grace that I had in that moment was kind of incredible. And I'm not like, this isn't me like talking big about myself. I'm just saying, like, because my natural response would have been something other than I did. That's why I said it was incredible.
It
Like,
surprised you. Yeah.
right. It was surprising. Thank you. Yes. Like, no, I really got to figure it out that time. I got to tell you, no, that's not what I'm saying. But a lot of it was because what was being expressed at me was something that I've expressed to people 1,000 times. And I know on the other side of that expression, how you feel on the inside and that you don't like it.
Yeah,
and
it's hard.
In that moment, I was like, oh, I am so sorry for what you're feeling on the inside because I've experienced it. I know it. And even though I might be receiving it right now, I still have so much grace for you because I know, I know what you're experiencing. And when we get to that place with people, we get that first off, when we get that place with ourselves, now we're making some headway. But then when we are able to take that grace and then like freely give that away in a way that's meaningful and impactful, that to me goes back to the power of the resurrection. Like that's the power of the resurrection to transform us so that we can go out and be transforming forces out in our world and hopefully be making a difference out there. Hopefully, whether it's working like your dad does with, immigrants, population and all of that, or wherever God has placed you, kind of what's the grace that you can show in the world that you're in right now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. We have the ultimate example so that we can do, whatever it is we're able to do.
Yes.
With our
and
own
whatever
small
we've been given
lives.
to do.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes. Let's not extend this podcast into 20 minutes because I think we could keep going on this one. But no, I think that's absolutely right. So, Abby, we've gone on another journey here.
We have.
I'm hoping we get to do this one more time this year. We'll see as we get closer because there's some fun ones around like October, right? There's All Saints Day.
Yeah.
And there's like 2 or 3. Do you have them off the top of your head?
Pentecost, All Saints Day, All Souls Day. What else have we not talked about? Ascension Day. Like there's a few still coming up that don't get as much attention, but that I really love. All Saints Day and All Souls Day especially have a lot of really fun spaces for exploration that that kind of go into both movies and the church itself. So
and kind of historical context too.
I think
there are days that we're all celebrating around, but we don't put them into a Christian context most of the time. So
so absolutely.
Maybe we'll get a chance to have that conversation later in the year. So, Abby, thank you once again. I appreciate you joining us on this journey of Christian calendar and film. And like we keep saying, Abby wrote a great book, so go buy it. It's super fun, and you will enjoy it and be on this journey with us. And there it is, Film for All Seasons. All right, everybody, let's go out today and live faith first. Hey, you're still here. That's awesome. That tells me you enjoyed our latest episode of the Live Faith First podcast, where we stopped and we talked about Easter. Today, let's keep it simple. Would you put in the comments one thing you're grateful for? What Jesus did on the cross absolutely changed the history of the universe. What's one thing in your life that you are grateful for because of what Jesus did on the cross, and remembering that he rose from the grave so that we could all have eternal life? So everybody today, give us comments about what you're grateful for. And you know what? Let's all live faith first.